Hello everyone and welcome. I am Rochelle Bertasso, one of your Helpside HR business partners. We want to welcome you to round 2 of our HR Bootcamp training, Leading a Workforce in the 21st Century. This is a 3-part series covering best practices and resources for the entire employee life cycle. We are glad you're joining us today and hope you will be able to join us for our final round of Bootcamp tomorrow from 11 a.m. to 12 noon Mountain Standard Time. Our main presenters for today are Jeff Ng, our Senior HR Business Partner, and Daryl Harmon, HR Consultant over Training and Development. Before we get started, we have a few housekeeping items to make you aware of. After today's webinar, you will receive a follow-up communication containing all of the information seen at the bottom of this slide, including a copy of the PowerPoint presentation, location information for all referenced Helpside resources, including forms, documents, and templates, the SHRM and HRCI activity codes, and finally, a link to our webinar recording itself in case you would like to review the information sometime in the future. If during the webinar you have questions or technical issues, please feel free to use the Q&A section located to the right of your screen. We do have HR staff standing by to help. For questions asked that might benefit all of our listeners, we will take time to have Jeff and Daryl answer as many of those as possible, either during or toward the end of our webinar today. So it's day 2, and as promised, our focus today is on keeping employees on track and engaged. Some of the topics covered today will include compensation, performance management, and employee engagement. So without further ado, I'll now give the floor over to Jeff and Daryl.
Great. Thanks, Rochelle. Welcome, everybody. As Rochelle just said, we're going to dive right into compensation. So one of the key ways that we can keep our employees and keep them happy. Before we go into details around that, though, I'm going to toss it back to you, Rochelle, and have you talk to us about total rewards, so kind of big picture, holistic approach to compensation. Give us some tips about that.
Yeah, well, thanks, Daryl. So compensation is definitely key when attracting and retaining employees, but it isn't the only meaningful component to a company's offering. So it may be wise to consider developing a total reward strategy to basically show employees why they would want to come to work for you and hopefully stick around for the long haul. The total reward strategy program typically includes 5 key areas. The first is, of course, compensation. Most employees, regardless of title or role, have some kind of pay expectation, and it's obviously important to be competitive in your offering. So if either now or in the future you have a position to fill and aren't sure if your pay is competitive, let us know and we can provide a salary survey for you, just to make sure you kind of know what's out there in the market. The second is benefits. This is one of the best ways to show your employees that you care about them both on and off the clock. The big ones are, of course, health, dental, vision, and retirement. But if you're a Helpside client, there are other supplemental benefits available to your employees as well, such as critical illness, hospital, and accident plans, and possibly others if your company has signed up. Occasionally, we find that our clients forget or are unaware of what's available, so be sure you know and take advantage of the opportunity to show employees or potential employees the value you are providing. That said, if you do have questions about benefits, either what's currently available to your employees or how to expand your offering, give us a call and let's see if we can help. The third is work-life balance. Leaders are continually recognizing the need for employees to enjoy time off. This can really help reduce stress for your workforce and put a person's mind at ease if they need to take leave when they're sick or if a family member needs care. If you're looking to change your PTO policy or begin offering one, let us know and we can definitely provide some guidance there. But another option is to occasionally incorporate social activities within the workday. This can also provide a feeling of downtime and just fun for your employees while still on the clock. The fourth is growth and development. Most employees want to learn and grow. No one really likes to feel stuck or that they're only seen as being able to do one thing. So consider taking some time to routinely check in with your employees and find out what they're interested in doing and learning. This can open up some great dialogue and be highly motivating, especially when the conversation is followed with new tasks or learning opportunities in the future. Companies can also consider providing tuition reimbursement for classes, certifications, or other work-related education. And finally, we have performance and service recognition. This is a really great way to improve the employee experience because at the end of the day, employees want to know that what they do matters. So finding creative and simple ways to recognize excellence within your organization can help employees stay engaged and reminded of the qualities and types of actions you want driving your company culture. So this is not only a great way to boost employee morale, but also a way to communicate your culture and values, sort of what's important to you as a company.
Excellent. That's a wonderful overview. In fact, we're going to dive into a few of those in more detail as we go along, but a great high-level, holistic view of compensation. All right, let's shift gears a little bit, Jeff, and let's talk about exempt and non-exempt status. So yesterday we had posed one of these questions, or this was one of the questions that we had posed, and we're going to now answer it. So let's suppose your Chief Operating Officer asks you to change your team leads to exempt or salaried status to save on overtime expenses. So what's the process for that? Is it to email us at Human Resources at Helpside and make the request? Do you announce the change internally, then wait 30 days for it to take effect? Do you conduct an exempt status duties test to see if it's even possible? Or do you just save time and tell your COO, can't do it? Or all of the above?
So what do you guys think?
All right, we've got a quick answer already. Let's see what everyone else thinks. What is the process for changing someone from non-exempt to exempt?
All right, looks like the bulk of you are saying the third one there, to conduct an exempt status duties test.
We've got a vote for number 1 and number 2. Perfect. Yeah, no one dares tell the COO it's impossible, right? Yeah, okay, you guys caught that. That was just a goofy answer just for humor's sake. Not very funny, but especially if you actually try and do that. Now our COO would probably laugh at that and just say, ha, 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 ha.
Yeah.
Get back to work.
Yeah, probably.
Okay, looks like we have our answers in, Jeff. Then tell us, what is the true answer?
Yeah, so the true answer is just that. You do need to conduct an exempt status duties test in order to make any of those changes. And we're going to talk about that in just a second. So before we get into that, let's kind of define what these look like. So what are the differences between non-exempt and exempt? We get this question from a lot of our clients quite often, and this is the difference. Non-exempt employees are eligible for overtime, whereas exempt employees are not eligible for overtime.
Right, so one is exempt from the federal law, the other is not exempt from the federal law. So it's sort of a double negative, but
yes,
basically that's what you just said in plain English.
Yeah, it's fairly simple. It's just like that. The tricky part is, how do you determine when an employee should be exempt or non-exempt? Well, we have a tool for that.
Sounds like we can't just decide on our own, right?
No.
Okay.
No, it would be a lot easier sometimes, but no. So are salaried and exempt the same thing? That is a great question, and no, they are not the same thing. Okay? You can be salary non-exempt. That is one thing that is new to a lot of people, or at least it's not a new thing, but it's new to a lot of people. You can be salaried and non-exempt. The hard part about being salary non-exempt is you still have to track your hours. You are eligible for overtime. So one of the questions we ask when our clients contact us and they say, hey, I've got a salary employee that ... Right. The first thing we ask is, are they non-exempt or are they exempt?
Right. This is tricky because exempt employees are salaried, but being salaried doesn't make them exempt, because like you just said, somebody could be salaried and non-exempt, in which case they have a salary, but you still need to track for overtime purposes.
Yes.
That's where it gets a little bit tricky.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, so to help you out, because we wouldn't leave you in the dark on this.
No way.
We have the overtime exemptions duties test on our website. You can download this, you can look at it, and you can determine if your workforce or specific positions should be exempt or non-exempt. And you can see the first couple on here. There's professional exemption and administrative exemptions. There's a few more depending on the job types there. But you do need to go through and make sure that you check each of the boxes. If you cannot check each of the boxes, they should not be exempt status. That being said, a very good indicator of that is the employee has to make at least $455 per week. If they're not making that much, they cannot be exempt. So that's a very good indicator right off the bat. So But again, look at that. If you have questions about that, should they or shouldn't they, do the test and then give us a call. We can help walk you through what some of these look like, because it can be a tricky process.
Excellent. Great. Mystery number 1 solved today. Thanks, Jeff. All right, let me give you a scenario here, Jeff. We're going to be working with a non-exempt employee. So Maisie, who is a non-exempt employee, meaning she's hourly. Her typical schedule is 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. And Maisie is going to go on Thursday. She's going to fly out to attend a professional conference on Friday and Saturday. Then Maisie's going to take a vacay day on Sunday, just kind of chill before she returns back. She'll fly back on Monday and then clock back in on Tuesday. So the question I have for you, Jeff, is what hours do we pay her for? Is it the trip to the airport? Is it the flight out? Is it just the conference? Is it the whole week? What kind of break this down for? It's kind of complex, but give us in a nutshell, what hours do we have to pay her for?
Yeah, I love this question. We get this question from our clients quite often. And it's a very loaded question.
That's right, a lot of moving parts.
There are a ton of moving parts. So we're just going to give you a brief overview of what this looks like. If this comes up with your organization, please call us and we'll walk you through in greater detail on that. But essentially, flight times might be paid.
Might? When?
If
Okay.
a couple things are happening. First, if it's within their regular scheduled day, so Daryl mentioned that the work schedule is 8 to 5, Monday through Friday, so if they're flying during that time period, then yes, that would be a paid day. However, travel time to the airport is not paid, that is separate, so you have to calculate that piece. If they're flying outside of their work schedule, such as on a red-eye or something, then that would not have to be paid because it's outside of their work schedule. Unless,
Of course.
always an unless, right? So if they are working on the flight, on the red-eye flight, if they're working on the conference, if they're tweaking their presentation, or if they're talking about which ones they're going to go to or participate in, if they're talking about work-related things, then yes, that does need to be paid. That's very tricky when sending a non-exempt employee to conferences and things like this. It gets very tricky.
Yeah. So how much of the conference, do we pay the whole Friday and Saturday, or just conference hours, or break that one down for us?
Yeah, so that one is similar. Conference hours, when they attend the conference, yes, that needs to be paid. Again, Friday, that's her regular scheduled day anyway, so that would be paid anyway. Saturday, she doesn't normally work Saturday, so whatever time she is actually at the conference, that is when you would pay her for the Saturday hours at the conference. That being said, if the conference is an 8 to 3 conference, so the conference ends at 3, they go do their own thing, but then they go out to lunch as a team afterward, because this happens quite often, or to dinner, lunch or dinner, doesn't matter, I guess. If it's outside of the conference and they're just chit-chatting about how the Lakers didn't make it into the playoffs this year, just throwing that out there. So if they're talking about things like that, that does not need to be a paid dinner. But if, again, you're talking about work-related items or talking about the conference, tweaking the presentations, or whatever it is you're doing, if it's work-related, that is now a paid dinner. So be mindful of that. And then Sunday is not paid. That's just a vacation day or a relaxing day. Monday, again, same thing. Depending on when the flight times are, it could be paid. And then Tuesday, she's back to work like normal.
That's a lot. That's complicated. All right, so I guess the major takeaway is you're paying her for time that she's working, even though this is not her regular job, and then it gets complicated from there. Give us a call.
Yes.
Okay. Thanks, Jeff. That'll be the hardest one we tackle all day, I think. All right, let's shift gears then. Let's talk about the difference between contractors or 1099s and employees, W-2s. So let's suppose this is Gary. Gary has worked for us for many years, and now it is time to retire. So Gary is ready to trade in his director's baton or conductor's baton for a fishing pole. And he says, see you later, good to know you, I'm going to go relax a little bit. The problem is that there's a project coming up and Gary has a specific skill set that we need. So we're going to hire him back as a 1099 contractor. And Gary's back with us. Now, in conjunction with this project that Gary's going to help us with, he's going to go to some training we're going to send him to. We're going to give him some equipment, a laptop, and a cell phone. And we'd like him to coordinate with the team, so we want him to come in 3 days a week so the team can meet and get this project done. So, Jeff, tell us what's wrong with this situation.
So there are several things wrong with it. To start with,
we shouldn't have let him retire. Okay, no,
Yeah,
we can't stop him from that. All right,
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
I know, sometimes that would be the easiest solution,
Yeah.
absolutely. But to bring it back as a contractor, they did it incorrectly.
Okay.
The reason for that is it's all about control. Who is in control of the situation? So to break that down a little bit, if the employer is giving them a schedule and giving them equipment, then the employer is in control, which means they are an employee. If the employee or the person is in control, meaning they set their own schedule, they bring their own equipment, they work on their own timetable, all of that, then the employee is in control and therefore is an independent contractor, not an employee. Again, a little bit tricky, but there are very specific things that have to happen in order to be independent contractor or an employee. And again, we would not leave you in the dark on this.
That's right. It sounds, in fact, like exempt, non-exempt. We don't really get to determine that.
Yes.
There are some
correct.
guidelines around that. So.
Yep. So the guidelines that Daryl's talking about are the independent contractor versus employee 20-factor test. And this is not something that Helpside did. Okay.
Right.
This is a government questionnaire. This is what they put together for all organizations. So what you would do if you're trying to determine if somebody can be an independent contractor is you would go through the 20-factor test, and depending on the results of the questions, that will determine if they are an independent contractor or if they are not an independent contractor. It can get tricky, and one thing to note on both this and the duties test, make sure you're doing these tests, both of these tests, quite often where clients call and say, hey, we really like this person, we want to make it easier for them, so we're going to make them exempt, or we're going to make them an independent contractor. That's not the case. That's not how it works. It has to be position-based, not person-based.
Yeah, in fact, I had a client call just the other day, and he was hiring a guy. He needed somebody in there, but he wasn't sure if the guy would work out. So the candidate actually said, well, just start me as a contractor. And then if I don't do a good job in the first 3 months, then, don't hire me on full-time. Well, neither of those two, the candidate nor the employer, could make that decision. It really does depend on the position, like you're saying, Jeff.
Yep.
Excellent. Okay, let's shift gears again and go from compensation now to performance management. This is about how we deal with people day to day. This is the bulk of our life as employers, is managing the performance of our employees. So this has 3 pieces to it that we'll go through in a little bit of detail. Communication is the first one, documentation is another one, and then finally record keeping. So this is kind of most of the lifespan of an employee. So the first piece here then is performance management is communication. So we need to talk about the good stuff, the bad stuff, everything in between, but we need to keep the lines of communication open. So we want to ask you, our listeners, how comfortable you are with talking, but not talking in general, but specifically around giving performance feedback. And that's just a nice way of saying when someone's not doing so well. Well, it could be they're doing well, but how comfortable are you giving performance feedback? From 1 to 7, anywhere from nope, that ain't happening, to you bet, feel good about it. Good. Looks like a number of people are chiming in already, more toward the upper side of the scale.
And that's good.
Yeah.
We like to see that, but definitely understand when people, there we go, when somebody
Yes.
falls under the no thank you.
No thank you.
Right? It happens.
I'll delegate that, thank you.
Yeah, it's easier sometimes.
Hello,
for
Helpside,
sure.
yes. And we certainly can help with some of those, but
Yes.
okay, looks like people have chimed in and told us that for the most part they feel pretty comfortable, but once again, it's not unusual if you're less than thrilled to do that.
Yeah, so let's give you some reasoning behind why we asked this question. So Office Vibe is an employee engagement survey solution, and this is what they gave us. It says that 82% of employees appreciate both positive and negative feedback. That is very key. And forgive me, I'm going to call out age again, but millennials
Right.
specifically love feedback. If it's positive or negative, they don't care. They want to hear how they're doing.
Absolutely. Lines of communication. Quick story. I was working years ago at a manufacturing, and we had 4 shifts and 4 shift supervisors, and one of them was kind of a hard guy. I mean, he would tell you straight to your face that you were doing a bad job. And so one day I was talking to one of his employees, and I said, what's it like working for Joe, not his real name? And she said, oh, I love it. And I said, really? Why? And she said, you know what? You always know where you stand with Joe. And so positive, negative, people want to know, because no news is not good news. No news is like, what are they thinking about me?
Yeah.
So absolutely, people want to hear it.
Yeah, they want to hear it. And to that point, Daryl, at the same time, let's bring it up. There we go. 4 out of 10 employees actively are disengaged when given no feedback. I think this is true for everybody, right? At some point in our careers, at some point we're probably going to be disengaged, and it's probably because they're not getting any feedback,
Right.
one way or the other. I don't know where I stand, like you were saying,
Yeah.
so I'm just going to sit here and wait
Right.
and see what happens, which is not the best idea. Always try to get feedback, good, bad, or otherwise, whenever possible.
Let people know how they're doing. I mean, there's a case to be made for autonomy. We don't want to micromanage people, but abandonment is not autonomy. There's a difference there, right? We don't want to just say, great, go to it. All right, so here's a scenario for you, Jeff. Let's suppose we've got Joe and Mike, and they're two guys who are talking about this guy here. This is Mark. And so Joe says, you know, Mark's worthless. He doesn't know what he's doing. He drinks every day at lunch. And Mike chimes in and he says, right? I'm always having to fix his problems. And he got the promotion because he plays basketball with one of the boss's friends. Okay, sounds like time for some performance conversation here. Time to speak up.
Yes.
So we have for you a 6-step process that can help you walk through this conversation. And it really revolves around these 2 S words. So if you see something, say something. If you hear something you don't like, say something. And there are 6 simple steps that you can use. So here's what they stand for. The S is share your observation, the first S. Share your observations. So just start with what you heard, what you saw. And then you're going to inquire for details. You're going to dig a little bit. You're going to ask the other person, well, so what was going on? The E is evaluate their response. The second S then is to share the impact of the behavior. So why do I care about what you just did or what I just saw? Agree on next steps to fix the problem. And the Y is establish accountability. So let's go through in just a little more detail each of these. The first one then, share your observations. What you're going to do to start this conversation is simply describe the situation and the behaviors. So who was involved? It was Joe, it was you and Mike, and you were talking about Mark, right? Here's what I heard or I observed. You guys were saying this, that, and the other about him not being a good worker and drinking and only getting the promotion because he knew the right person, and where that took place. You know, that took place yesterday in the break room. So this conversation can be a little risky, maybe for you, but especially for Joe and Mike, because you're calling them on the carpet about something they did. But you're not trying to punish, you're just trying to solve the problem. So you want to start off as emotionally neutral as possible. And so this is a good way to start.
Next, you're going to inquire for details. And this is where it gets really fun. You want to ask open-ended questions, such as, and this isn't necessarily a question, but they're going to answer it anyway,
Right.
Help me understand your view of the situation. Right? They're going to give you a very loaded answer, even though it's not a yes or no, or it's not an open-ended question. They're still going to give you a lot of detail. You can also include, if that doesn't flow or doesn't feel right, you could say, what have you seen or heard about?
Yeah, why are you
what's
saying
the
Mark
situation?
drinks at lunch? Have you seen him drink, or does he just come back stumbling around 1 o'clock or whatever? But yeah,
what evidence do you have? You know, the witnesses, other people, just really inquiring for details. What have you seen? What do you know?
exactly. You're really kind of being a detective here. So what evidence do you have? That's a great way to put it.
And then you could also ask, what was your intention? Now, again, that can come across very negatively. What was your intention? Why in the world would you ask? No, don't come at the employee. Don't make them feel like,
Right.
you know, they're lesser of a person or anything like that. It's just, what was your intention? Why were you talking about him in the first place? What were you trying to gain by doing that?
Right.
Really kind of give us an idea why you were doing that.
Yeah, so Mike and Joe, what was your purpose in talking about Mark that way, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so that's step number 2. Then from here, you're going to take their answers and you're going to evaluate those responses, and you're going to ask yourself, all right, were Mike and Joe, were they doing anything that was immoral, unethical, or illegal? Or was it within or outside their control? Now, in this case, you know, it's pretty much in their control. They were talking about Mark, their coworker. And then, are there any policies, guidelines, or laws that factor in? So in this case, I don't know if you have a policy against speaking bad about your coworker, but we might have something in our handbook that addresses this, or maybe not. And then also, how serious is it? So if this is a little thing, then keep it little. If it makes the headline news tomorrow, are we going to be embarrassed, or are we going to be sued? Or is it just a little thing, a little friction between coworkers that we can resolve at a low level? So you're going to evaluate, you're going to assess, is this a big deal or not, and in what ways?
And once you've done all of that, then you want to share the impact with that employee. So bring the employee back and you say what that impact is. So who and what are affected? Were you affected? Was the team affected? Was the company affected? Who in general and specifically was affected by it? And then describe how they were affected, how that impacted them. So was productivity taking a huge major hit on that? Is the reputation of the company down? Also, who's liable for that? Is the manager, is the employee, is Mark liable for all that? So you want to share all of those things with the employee at that point. And then again, share the degree of severity with the employee as well. Is it a small degree? Is it a medium degree? Is it a large degree like Daryl just mentioned? Is it going to hit the news? What is the impact of it hitting the news?
Right. So you want to share with your workers, gee, that was kind of a dumb thing you guys did, or hey, you know what, you're actually in violation of policy, and maybe the reputation. So now what you're going to do is agree on the next steps, because this is behavior you don't want to continue. And so you're basically going to say, okay, guys, where do we go from here? Now that I've heard you out, now that you understand my view of it, the impact and how it impacts all of us here, what do you think would resolve this issue? And what you want to do is put them in the position to make the change, because they're the ones who have to make the change, right? I mean, you can't do it as the boss because they're the ones who are doing the talking. So you're going to ask them for their plan for correction. It also gives them ownership so that they actually will carry it out. And your role then as the boss, as it were, as this third party, is to be supportive. So how can I support you? What do you guys need from me? Should we get the 3 of us or the 4 of us together rather and talk this out? Do you guys need a review of the policy, about drinking during lunch so that we can get clear on Mark's behavior? Basically, you want to be in a support role so that they then carry out the solution. And then finally?
Yeah, and those next steps are very important, because then it all leads into accountability. You have to hold the employee or employees accountable for whatever next steps they come up with. So if they say, yeah, we'll never do that again, and then you hear, oh, hey, I just heard you're doing that again, right, you have to hold them accountable for that. If that means you have to write them up, if that means you have to terminate, whatever it may be, you have to hold them accountable. Leaders and managers lose a lot of credibility as leaders and managers when they stop holding people accountable. If it's to policies, laws, procedures, whatever it may be, credibility really goes out the window when accountability is not taking place.
This is a great point, because there could be many people affected here. So there could be other coworkers who overhear Mike and Joe talking about Mark, and really at a minimum we've got 2 conversations to hold. One with Mike and Joe about talking about Mark, and then probably with Mark. I mean, if he really is drinking on the job, then we have to have this conversation with him and hold him accountable for his behavior, and we use this process all the way around. So 6 simple steps to help you talk through a tough conversation that you really need to have. And to your point, Jeff, a lot of times leaders do lose credibility because everyone else sees what's going on. They hear what's going on, and they expect the leader to step up and have this conversation.
Now, again, I'm sure some of you are sitting there scrambling, trying to take notes on this. We have a resource for you, so you don't have to do that. We should have set up front. We apologize, but we have this resource on the website for you. It's just a really quick guide that walks you through the 6 different say steps.
Say that 3 times fast.
Ooh, I can't even say it 1 time fast. Yeah, so it'll walk you through all of these different things. So really, it's a really good, useful tool. Start practicing it. Really, it's going to do your organization a lot of good to start putting these types of things in place. We'll explain why here coming up shortly.
That's right. We'll get into some details. But once again, this is a good resource, and we also can be a resource. If you have a particularly tough conversation to talk through, we've had many clients call in and say, oh, I've got this one that I'm dreading. So again, we can help you. This is the basic outline that we'll help you with. All right, so let's shift then to the second part of performance management, which is to document. So you want to create some sort of critical incident file or something that documents even conversations that you have. This isn't necessarily a write-up or a written warning, but what it is documenting the conversation that I had. So this happened, and that happened, and the next, and finally, because in HR we have a little saying, if it's not documented, it didn't happen. That's right. Because you try and go in front of a judge with well, I told them and they didn't do it, and the judge says, well, where's your documentation?
Yep.
If it's not documented, it didn't happen. So you want to document it in some way. So why do we document? Well, because stuff happens. Time passes and stuff happens. A lot of things happen, and the details start to fade from your memory around, well, was it Mike and Joe, or was it Todd and Joe, or was Were they talking about Mark, or was it, yeah. And so your memory fades, workforce changes, and all these things shift over time, and what seems super clear today becomes less clear tomorrow and the next day and next week. So you want to document it, do it as soon as you've had the conversation if you need to. And as always, we have a tool for this.
We have a tool for that, yes. So we have what we call the corrective action notification form, and this is a way, it's not the only way or the best way, but it is a way for you to document whenever instances happen. And this form is actually a client favorite. This is the most downloaded form from our website. So it's a really great, useful tool. Really utilize it whenever you can, because this is what's going to save you if ever you're in front of a judge. Just like Daryl said, if it's not documented, didn't happen, you're going to start to lose cases if you don't have this. So we're going to spend a little bit of time all about this form, walking through the different parts of it, why it's important, and we're going to start with the 4 levels of discipline. So we've all heard this. This is the progressive discipline process. It's the verbal, written, final, and then termination. Okay. Sometimes organizations do like to go through and do a suspension at some point, which is perfectly fine. That can help or hurt the situation, so it's not always recommended, but at least at a minimum, do a verbal, written, final, and then move to termination, because that's going to show the judge that you gave the employee multiple opportunities to improve and they chose not to improve. With a verbal warning, we get a question quite often, hey, do we have to actually write out and have the employee sign off that they did this on a verbal warning? The answer is no. You can if you want, but it's not necessary, and sometimes it really hurts morale to have them sign off on something when it's just a simple conversation, simple coaching session for that matter. So we recommend, just so that it's documented that the conversation took place, verbally have that conversation with the employee, and then go back immediately or shortly thereafter and send that same employee an email just stating, hey, these are the things we discussed, this is the outcome, this is the goals, do you have any questions about it? That way it's still documented, but they don't actually have to sign off on something. So it's a good way to kind of cheat that system, if you will, to keep the employee happy on that.
Well, and maybe these are for the less serious offenses that we talked about earlier, right? Once you've assessed the response and like, okay, this is just something we can talk out, then it kind of goes away over time when behavior changes.
Yep. Perfect. Yes, thank you. So after the levels of discipline, there is the section for violation types. Generally, it's usually one violation. It's a performance issue, it's an attendance issue, or a safety or something like that. Sometimes they do overlap, however. Sometimes you could have an employee that shows up intoxicated, which then also creates a safety violation. So sometimes, yes, you can have 2 or even 3 or multiple different things. The caution to this, however, is whenever you're doing a termination, make sure you select one item. The judge wants to see, assuming it gets to a judge, the judge wants to see what was the final incident. Was it because he showed up intoxicated, or was it because there was a safety issue? Now, yes, one led to the other, but what are you terminating them for? You can't terminate for both. It's got to be one or the other in the eyes of a judge.
And this is really for wrongful termination suits or even unemployment claims, right?
Yes.
You want to have this really clear. This was the straw that broke the camel's back.
Yes. Yep, and you just have to prove this is why. And that's the next part of the form, which is the documentation details. So at any point, if you're doing a verbal, written, or final, and even with termination, you are going to give a description of the violation. Now is not the time for your opinion. You know, oh, I think he showed up intoxicated. No, you need facts at this point. They showed up intoxicated, there was a safety issue, and we did a drug test, and the drug test did prove that, yes, they had something in their system. Facts. It has to be fact-based whenever you're writing any type of good description of the violation. Then you're going to move into the improvement plan piece, which is very set and very specific goals and timeframes. So this employee did this. Now we need to see better improvement. We need to see X percentage of improvement. We need to see 0 tolerance moving forward on an alcohol or substance abuse, whatever it may be. It needs to be very well spelled out right there in the improvement plan. There's also a section for employee comments. Not required, but if they want to write anything down, they're more than welcome to do so. But then there is the further action piece. And this is the most important part, and on our form, we've actually left it in there. You can tailor it and you can make it your own if you want, but it states that any future violation of this policy or any other company policy will result in additional documentation up to and including termination. That's very key. They need to know that further action, if they break this policy or any other violation, will result in additional documentation or termination. They need to know that right up front. They need to know the severity of it, which is why they're going to be getting a verbal, written, or final anyway.
So it sounds, Jeff, like this really serves, this documentation and this progressive disciplinary process accomplish really two goals. One is to hopefully turn the employee around, and so that you kind of reclaim that good employee that used to, or the employee who used to be good. But then also it puts you on solid legal foundation if you need to go to court over anything like that.
Yeah, that's the ultimate goal, is trying to help the employee get better.
Right.
Yep.
And if they refuse, then we're on solid
Then you're
ground
justified. Yep.
Right,
Absolutely.
exactly. All right, well, let's move to a sample corrective action notification that maybe could have been written a little bit better. We've got Xander Wright, who's an equipment assembler, and here's the write-up by the supervisor. Xander is lazy. His work performance causes low production. He never gets his work done on time. And the improvement plan, get numbers up by end of quarter or move to final warning, and then signatures and dates. And you notice the employee didn't sign, which is okay at this point because the manager's taken the initiative here. But as I mentioned, maybe not the best. Jeff, talk us through the problems here.
Yeah, so there's a few problems with this, starting with lazy. And I love this because we see this every now and again,
Yep.
you know, some absolutes like this. Okay? Lazy is a very strong negative label, okay? And it requires evidence to validate. So how do you prove somebody is lazy?
Yeah, what's that mean?
It's very subjective.
Yeah.
You know, my definition of lazy might be different from your definition. So it's very difficult to prove that. So you probably shouldn't be putting that Xander's lazy. That's not a good label. All right, then it goes in and it says that his laziness causes low production. Well, is it really the sole reason why there's low production? Is it because everybody's having an off day? Is it because he was late? Or is it the entire team? What really is the reason? I don't think it's because Xander is lazy.
Yeah, and is it equipment? I mean, Xander might come back
be.
and reasonably say, you know what, I'm just a pretty chill person, and the machine was down, so I was just sitting, taking a break. And that's, you know, that's not on me.
Yeah, there could be a wide variety of things.
Right.
Again, that's not very descriptive.
Yeah, you
or
want to
factual.
set yourself up so that Xander really doesn't have much of a defense. If you know.
Yes, and next, he never gets his work done on time. I love this because that's an absolute statement.
Right.
And I'm going to break this rule, but you should never use absolutes.
Saw what you did there, Jeff.
Yes.
That was clever.
Okay? Now, there are times where, yes, you could use an absolute. For example, if you put on there that Xander is never on time, and you go back and look at the timesheet, and sure enough, he has yet to be on time in the history of his employment, then you could use that. But rarely are absolutes ever true, so don't use them. Those can come back and get you in trouble later.
What I noticed too about these words, these descriptions, are they're pretty emotionally charged. So I'm frustrated with Xander, so I'm going to call him lazy. I'm going to say he's the problem of our performance, our production numbers being down, and he never gets his work done on time. And really, I'm just blowing steam.
Yes.
That's not going to be good in front of a judge.
Yeah, because none of this is factual, absolutely. So then finally, we've got a very vague goal which goes along with that. Well, he needs to get his numbers up. Well, what does up mean? Is that by 1%? Does he need to make a few more widgets in an hour or in a day? We just don't know based off of get your numbers up. That does not help.
So help us, Jeff. How do we write this better?
So again, it needs to be fact-based. Always should be fact-based. Like you said, it's emotion-based. You know, so keep that out of it. You don't want opinions. You don't want, I think this is why it happened. No, you need facts only. So Xander has not mastered the new standard of operating procedures. After 3 weeks of training, the rest of his crew has implemented the new standards and are meeting their daily production goals. Xander has not met his daily production goals since the rollout of the new procedures on January 2nd. So very descriptive. It's very good. The rest of the team has. Xander has not. It's a little long, but it still works.
It's okay. A judge is going to say, okay, now I know what you're talking about, and you've got some proof here.
Yeah, and it shows the rest of the team is doing all right, but he is not. So then, what are the goals? So Xander is expected to improve his production by 5% each week. That's very specific. We like that. He will have 8 weeks to meet this goal. That's even better because now there's a timeline in there. That's great. If he is not able to meet his production goals by April 7, 2017, his employment will be terminated. So again, it gives right there what will happen, what next steps are if he doesn't get it up. So that's much better stated from that right there. And again, we're not going to leave you high and dry. We have resources for you. So if you're trying to take some notes on that, again, we should tell everybody up front, right? We do this backwards. Sorry about that. We have an employee discipline job aid for you that goes through the different levels, when to do it, how to do it, why to do it. And again, we also have the corrective action notification form for your use. Again, all of this is downloadable off the website. You'll get a copy of all of this at the end of the webinar as well.
So I'm sensing a pattern here, Jeff. We're going to talk about a problem, we're going to give a solution, and we're going to provide a resource.
Yes.
Excellent. All right. Well, let's shift gears then, and not two gears. Let's shift one gear. There we go. And introduce then the third step of performance management, which is record keeping. So to help us, help you understand and help us explain record keeping in general and some of the specific records in particular, we have our resident record expert here, Jana Bishop, and she is going to help us understand more about record keeping.
Thank you, Daryl. It's good to be here with you guys today. We'll start by taking a little poll, which will be how long should you keep corrective action forms? You think 1 year, 3 years, until employee termination, 30 years?
Okay, so we're going to talk about a lot of different documentation, but we've been talking about performance, so specifically a corrective action form.
I know like with payroll things, you can keep those about 4 years. Interview packets and notes, you keep those about 1 year. It looks like 3 years and until termination are kind of the top answers here.
It looks like we wrote a tricky poll because people aren't quite sure. There's a good mix of answers. That's fine. We like that.
I like it. All right. So what is the correct answer? It is 3 years. You should keep all of that for 3 years. This with the I-9s. Let's take a look at the documentation disaster that we've had there. We had a client just a few years ago had not been correctly filling out their I-9s, and they were audited by ICE. ICE came, took a look, and said, "Oh, you're doing things wrong.
They say that a lot.
Yeah, they do.
Say that a lot.
They do.
Yeah.
This is what you need to do better." So the company corrected 1 or 2 things, but not all of them. ICE comes back, and they were hit with a hefty fine. So because they did not comply, I think in this case they were fined about $350,000 just for incompliance or non-compliance, I guess.
That's a lot of zeros after the...
That's a lot. So here's some tips, some tricks for the I-9 that we have. We want to make sure that we are following the 3-day rule. Make sure that your employees know their birthday, their social. Those are some pretty common mistakes, which doesn't seem like should be, but it is. We also have a tool on the Helpside website for the I-9 overview. We can give you, there's about 10 different items on the website for like webinar, correction memo, most common errors and how to fix them on our website under the I-9 toolkit. And also, as we're talking about documentation, we have a record retention compliance overview on our website as well.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you, Jana. We appreciate your insights on that. And just as a heads up for everybody, that is a lot of information. There's a lot of different forms that need to be kept for different amounts of times, and like Jana said, this record retention compliance overview will give you details about how long you're supposed to keep which types of documents. Some of it's just 1 year, some of it's up to 30 years, some of it might be the lifespan of your entire organization. So take a look at it. Like Jana said, when you have some time, take a look at it, because some of your documentation you could probably get rid of. You could throw some of those old file folders, filing cabinets, some of that stuff out of your offices.
Whole boatloads of documents.
Yes.
But only after they've expired, basically.
Yes.
Excellent. Great. All right, well, let's shift gears then into our third section, employee engagement. now that we've got all the kind of the record keeping in place, let's talk about some easy ways that you can keep your employees around. Yesterday we shared some statistics, some scary statistics around how quickly people leave. So let's ask you, your retention rate. What is your current retention rate, more or less? It probably varies, but do you typically keep employees on average about 6 months or less, a year, 18 months, 2+ years? We'd all like to be in the 2+ years, but
Yes.
the reality is that doesn't always happen. And this really varies by industry, sometimes by company, but a lot of, some industries just have high turnover, others tend to keep their people. Excellent. Looks like those who are on the line today tend to keep their folks.
Which is really good.
Yeah. You're ahead.
That's really good, yes.
You're ahead of the curve, to be sure. So here's some breaking news. Companies lose on average about 30% of new hires within the first 90 days. Now, yesterday we shared, Jeff shared some stats with you that basically in the first 6 months you're losing about 15%. In the first year you're losing about half. And so this tracks right along with that. 3 months in you're losing about a third. So the trend is not really good. It's really easy to lose people. Unemployment is really low. People have options. So the bad news, it sounds like not for you on the line, but for a lot of companies, is that it's easy to lose people, a lot easier than to keep them. Here's some ancient news, and I say that because Frederick Herzberg years ago looked into employee motivation and retention, and he summarized his work this way. If you want someone to do a good job, give them a good job to do. Now, we know that you're just not making up fluff jobs all the time. You've got stuff that people need to do, and sometimes it's hard, and sometimes it's not fun. We're not talking about that. But we're talking about some ways that you can help people feel like they have a good job to do, take some pride in it, stick around and do it. And Herzberg also said this: true motivation comes from 4 things: achievement, personal development, job satisfaction, and recognition. So you can look at the ways in which you can enrich people's jobs in these 4 areas. So here's some quick keys in each of these 4 areas to give someone a good job to do. So achievement means the job fit. You're hiring someone with the right skills and attitude and aptitude. Autonomy, so you're not micromanaging them. You let them do their job. You stay out of their way. You support them. Helping them understand why their job is important, and they're finding a sense of meaning because they feel fulfilled, personally, because they're doing a good work. Satisfaction then comes from job status, so recognizing that everyone is important. Impact, so how are they impacting end users, customers, clients? What is their day-to-day activity? How does that add up to something good for the company? And setting and achieving goals. These are ways that people can find satisfaction. In terms of recognition, sometimes we think we have to break the bank to really recognize people right, but oftentimes all people want is a thank you. Thank you, I appreciate you doing that, a little bit of detail around that, and people feel validated. Rewards are great, and those can come in various forms, from company lunches to celebration days and whatnot. Team fun, so you take a day and you go bowling, or you go to a movie, or you go somewhere out fun together, or do something in-house fun. Profit sharing, if you're in a position to do that, that's recognizing the good efforts of everyone, and it literally pays off what they're doing. In terms of growth, skill mastery. So help me get the training I need, the coaching I need to really be good at my job. Everyone really deep down does want to do a good job. And sometimes we're not quite as skilled as we need to be. So some help there helps. Personal enrichment. Are there some ways that I can bring myself to work? Maybe we have a more lax dress code so I can dress the way I want, or just some way to express myself. And of course, promotion, that's another way of growing. And we recognize that most of us are working in small companies and we don't have a lot of upward mobility, but if there is that possibility, hiring from within is a great way to give someone a good job and something to look forward to. So just some really quick keys to help people feel like they have a good job. And once again, Jeff, there's a form for that.
There's a form.
Actually, there are a couple of them.
Yeah. Yeah, so a couple more tools and resources for you. So in the back here, we have a coaching plan, and this is not one of those corrective action type things.
Right.
This is for your employees that are doing really well, and you want to take them from good to better, or better to great. So it's just a way to give them a track to go onto. If you have a succession planning program, this would be a good way to get them from one step to the next. So it's a really good, useful tool for your good employees. Again, not a corrective action thing. It is just to get your employees from good to great. And then there's a stay interview sample questionnaire. So this is very key, and this is something a lot of companies are turning to these days. And that is something that a lot of people can do, and it's very simple. It's not a formal sit-down one-on-one conversation with your employees, although those are great too. We recommend doing those. But this is more of a, hey, in passing, as you're riding the elevator, these are great questions to ask your workforce about how they're doing, what's their mental state in the workforce, how's the family. So just some basic things so that the employees feel like you're engaging with them, you care about them, you want to see them succeed. So it's a great list of a lot of different questions to ask and a lot of different types of questions. So when you have some time, read through this and start asking your workforce, these questions to see if anything changes, see if their morale goes up, if they're more engaged after that. But don't wait until they're about to leave your organization to start this. At that point, it's too late.
Right, and a lot of companies, in fact, on that point, do exit interviews. But this is the new thought, is like, why do we wait until they leave to ask them what we could have done? Why don't we ask them now before they leave?
Yes, very useful tool to help with that retention rate, keeping it high. Then again, on the engagement piece, we have a few more things there. So in the very back, there's an employee engagement checklist that has some tips and tricks and ideas of things that you can do to make sure that your workforce is engaged. The next one is an employee retention scorecard to really rate and evaluate your organization to see how you're doing at making sure your employees are engaged. Then there's a salary survey request form. We talked about this earlier at the compensation piece. If you're not sure if you're paying your employees at market or close to industry standard, you can complete that form, send it to us. We have a system that we use that can generate local areas, local industries to make sure that you're paying about the same average. We can kind of get a good idea for where you're paying your employees at. So if you're not sure if you're paying people correctly, that is a really useful tool to make sure that you are. Then another thing for employee engagement, we've talked a little bit about work-life balance. So there's a PTO plan. If you don't have one, or if you haven't reviewed it in the past little bit, we recommend reviewing it. And we do have a PTO creation worksheet that walks you through the different types of PTO that there are, how you can calculate it, how to proceed with it, how they request it, all sorts of different questions. That really helps build a very good and solid PTO plan for your organization.
And we do a lot of those. So we've seen lots of different types of PTO plans, so
Yes.
we can really advise you on that. All right, that's enough instruction for today. Let's end on this thought. Zig Ziglar, the motivational expert, said this: people often say that motivation doesn't last. Well, neither does bathing. That's why we recommend it daily. Little things you can do throughout each day to help people feel like they made the right choice to join you, they want to stay, they want to give their best effort. And so it doesn't take a whole lot, and hopefully some of the ideas we shared with you today will resonate and will be useful for you.
All right, well, thanks you guys. We did have a couple of questions come in. Are you guys up for it?
Let's do it.
I'm motivated now.
Yeah.
So the first one comes from Eric. He wanted to know if we can assist in calculating a living wage.
Yes, we can. So similar to calculating everything else, there is that salary survey request form. If you complete that, you said it was Eric? Yeah, so Eric, if you complete that, and anybody, if you want to know what some of those are, complete that form. But along with that, make sure you're sending us a job description so that we know what it is, so that we can make sure that we're comparing the right things or the right positions to the correct wages. So send us the salary survey and also send us a job description, and we can get those done for you, yes.
Great.
Okay, next one. When is it recommended to be salary non-exempt? Is that ever a good thing?
That is a great question.
We're both pausing, looking at this and saying, well, it makes things a little tricky, but we do have clients who have that. Sometimes sales positions, for example, they might give a base plus, although salespeople sometimes will fall into exempt, sometimes won't, depending on if it's internal or external. But we don't see it a whole lot. I haven't seen it a whole lot, Jeff. It's a little unusual. But really, I guess what it does, giving somebody a salary then guarantees them a minimum amount. So it is kind of a win on the employee side. In fact, frankly, on the employee side, it's fine. If they don't really qualify for exempt, if you guarantee a certain amount for me plus you'll pay me overtime, that's a sweet deal.
That's
so
pretty happy.
Yeah, you might think about that if you have a situation in which you want to make sure you retain an employee. Then you can guarantee them a salary, and then if they don't qualify for exempt status, then you pay them overtime as well if they work overtime.
Yeah. It doesn't happen often. We don't see it much, like Daryl mentioned, so it is a possibility. It's not always recommended at the same time, Again, it's that tracking piece on the back end of it.
Right.
Did they actually work enough hours for
Right.
overtime? And that's where it gets hard, because then you have to prove it, especially if they file a wage claim. It's hard to track. So even if they are salaried, non-exempt, still have them clock in and out would be the best advice we can give you
Absolutely.
on that.
Yeah, and if you have non-exempt employees, you probably have a timekeeping system
Yes,
of some sort.
of some sort,
So just
yep.
have them use that. And if it gets more complicated with that, reach out to us. But I
Give us a
think
call. Yep.
that's our basic advice.
Yes.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you. All right. Well, here's another question. How often do you recommend giving either performance feedback or having stay interviews, coaching, that kind of thing? What's kind of the recommended?
Yeah, it depends on, so there's actually been a lot of research around performance reviews, annual performance reviews. A lot of companies are going away from the annual performance review for good reason, and mainly because if you do it annually, then it's old news. I mean, we've got 12 months to talk about. So the simple stuff every day is really the best kind of thing. So the thank you every day, the hey, how's it going? Is there anything I can do to help? I noticed you're running a little bit late. What's getting in your way? Those are performance conversations. And so they don't have to be big and heavy and sit down in a conference room somewhere. They can just be kind of chatty and just, and then with the stay interview, it's like, you know, if you had a magic wand and could change one thing about how we do work around here, what would you change? Or what's your biggest frustration this last week? These are really simple things you can just ask people anytime, any day. It doesn't take a long time, but it helps convey, number one, that you care and you're willing to help, and number two, lets them have a forum for airing anything. In fact, over time, it really does create more of a culture of communication, of open communication, where the boss is always asking me how things are going, and so I guess it's okay to tell him or her. So.
Yeah, no, I agree with everything Daryl just said. And in addition to that, with the stay interviews, I would say how often? As often as possible.
Yeah.
If that's a daily thing, then great. Make it a habit. Make it a daily. Don't ask the same question every day. That'll just become obvious. So
a little awkward, at least, if not annoying.
Yeah, absolutely. So as often as you can would be the best advice we can give on the stay interview piece. And you could make those formal. I've seen companies where they do stay interviews where they take their employees to lunch.
Right.
And they just have a formal one-on-one stay interview. It's not a performance evaluation. It's not a performance review. It's not even corrective action. It's just strictly stay interview based. So there's many, many, many different ways you could do it, many different time frames. The best advice we can give is just make sure that it works for you.
Yep. One of the best things you can do to convey to people that you want them to stay is to listen.
Awesome. All right. Well, that is all we have time for today. Thanks, you guys, so much for joining us. We look forward to seeing you all tomorrow for Boot Camp Round 3 at 11 a.m. Mountain Standard Time, where we will discuss ending the employee relationship. You definitely won't want to miss that. Thanks, everyone.
Have a good day, everybody.